The Haunted Mountain. Robert Ervin Howard. The reason I despises tarantulas, stinging lizards, and hydrophobia skunks is because they reminds me so much of Aunt Lavaka, which my Uncle Jacob Grimes married in an absent-minded moment, when he was old enough to know better. That the woman's voice plumb puts my teeth on edge, and it has the same effect on my horse, Captain Kidd, which don't generally shy at nothing less'n a rattlesnake. So when she stuck her head out of her cabin as I was riding by and yelled Breckenridge, Captain Kidd jumped straight up in the air, and then tried to buck me off. "Stop tormenting that poor animal and come here," Aunt Lavaka commanded, whilst I was fighting for my life against Captain Kidd's spine-twisting sun-fishing. "I never see such a cruel, worthless, no good." She kept right on yapping away until I finally wore him down and reined up alongside the cabin stoop and said, "What you want, Aunt Lavaka?" She gave me a scornful snort, and put her hands onto her hips and glared at me like I was something she didn't like the smell of. "I want you should go get your Uncle Jacob and bring him home," she said at last. "He's off on one of his idiotic prospecting sprees again. He snuck out before daylight with the bay mare and a pack mule. I wished I'd woke up and caught him. I'd have fixed him. If you hustle you can catch him this side of Haunted Mountain Gap. You bring him back if you have to lasso him and tie him to his saddle. Old fool. Off huntin' gold when they's work to be did in the alfalfa fields. Says he ain't no farmer. Huh. I'll make a farmer out of him yet. You get going." "But I ain't got time to go chasing Uncle Jacob all over Haunted Mountain," I protested. "I'm headin' for the rodeo over to Chordia. I'm going to win me a prize bulldoggin' some steers." "Bulldoggin'?" she snapped. "A fine occupash, hun. Gwan, you worthless loafer. I ain't going to stand here all day arguin' with a big ninny like you be. Of all the good-for-nothing, triflin', lunk-headed, when Aunt Lavaka starts in like that you might as well travel. She can talk steady for 3 days and nights without repeating herself, her voice getting louder and shriller all the time till it nigh splits a body's eardrums." She was still yelling at me as I rode up the trail toward Haunted Mountain Gap, and I could hear her long after I couldn't see her no more. Poor Uncle Jacob. He never had much luck prospecting, but trailing around through the mountains with a jackass is a lot better listening to Aunt Lavaka. A jackass's voice is mild and soothing alongside of hers. Some hours later I was climbing the long rise that led up to the gap, and I realized I had overtook the old coot when something went ping up on the slope, and my hat flew off. I quick-reined Captain Kidd behind a clump of brush, and looked up toward the gap, and seen a pack mule's rear end sticking out of a cluster of boulders. "You quit that shooting at me, Uncle Jacob," I roared. "You stay where you be." His voice come back, sharp as a razor. "I know Lavaki sent you after me, but I ain't going home. I'm onto something big at last, and I don't aim to be interfered with." "What you mean?" I demanded. "Keep back or I'll ventilate you," he promised. "I'm going for the lost haunted mine. You been hunting that thing for 30 years, I snorted. "This time I finds it," he says. I bought a map off a drunk Mex down to perdition. One of his ancestors was a Injun which helped pile up the rocks to hide the mouth of the cave where it is. Why didn't he go find it and get the gold? I asked. "He's scared of ghosts," said Uncle Jacob. "All Mexes is awful superstitious. This and you'd rather set and drink, know how? They's millions in gold in that the mine. I'll shoot you before I'll go home. Now will you go on back peaceable, or will you throw in with me? I might need you, in case the pack mule plays out." "I'll come with you," I said, impressed. "Maybe you have got something, at that. Put up your Winchester. I'm coming." He emerged from his rocks, a skinny leathery old cuss, and he said, "What about Lavaki? If you don't come back with me, she'll follow us herself. She's that strong-minded. I'll leave a note for her," I said. "Joe Hopkins always comes down through the gap once a week on his way to Chordia. He's due through here today. I'll stick the note on a tree, where he'll see it and take it to her." I had a pencil stub in my saddle bag, and I tore a piece of wrapping paper off in a can of tomatoes Uncle Jacob had in his pack, and I writ, "Dear Aunt Lavaka, I'm darkin' Uncle Jacob way up in the mountains. Don't try to follow us, it won't do no good. Gold is what I'm after. Breckenridge." I folded it and writ on the outside, "Dear Joe, please take this here note to Miss Lavaka Grimes on the Chordia Road. Then me and Uncle Jacob sought out for the higher ranges, and he started telling me all about the lost haunted mine again, like he'd already did about 40 times before. Seems like they was onked a old prospector which stumbled onto a cave about 50 years before then, which the walls was solid gold and nuggets all over the floor till a body couldn't walk, as big as mushmelons. But the Indians jumped him and run him out and he got lost and nearly starved in the desert, and went crazy. When he come to a settlement and finally regained his mind, he tried to lead a party back to it, but never could find it. Uncle Jacob said the Indians had took rocks and brush and hid the mouth of the cave so nobody could tell it was there. I asked him how he knowed the Indians done that, and he said it was common knowledge. Any fool oughta know that's just what they done. This here mine, says Uncle Jacob, is located in a hidden valley which lies away up amongst the high ranges. I ain't never seen it, and I thought I'd explored these mountains plenty. Ain't nobody more familiar with 'em than me except old Joshua Braxton. But it stands to reason that the cave is awful hard to find, or somebody'd already found it. According to this here map, that lost valley must lie just beyond Apache Canyon. Ain't many white men knows where that is, even. We're heading there. We had left the gap far behind us, and was moving along the slanting side of a sharp-angled crag whilst he was talking. As we passed it, we seen two figures with horses emerge from the other side, heading in the same direction we was, so our trails converged. Uncle Jacob glared and reached for his Winchester. "Who's that?" he snarled. "The big guns, Bill Glanton," I said. "I never seen t'other, and nobody else, outside of a freak museum," growled Uncle Jacob. This other fella was a funny-looking little maverick, with laced boots and a cork-sun helmet and big spectacles. He sat his horse like he thought it was a rocking chair, and held his reins like he was trying to fish with them. Glanton hailed us. He was from Texas, original, and was rough in his speech and free with his weapons, but me and him had always got along very well. "Where you all going?" demanded Uncle Jacob. "I am Professor Van Brock, of New York," said the tenderfoot, whilst Bill was getting rid of his tobacco wad. "I have employed Mr. Glanton, here, to guide me up into the mountains. I am on the track of a tribe of aborigines, which, according to fairly well substantiated rumor, have inhabited the haunted mountains since time immemorial." "Listen here, you four-eyed runt," said Uncle Jacob in wrath, "are you giving me the horse laugh? I assure you that equine levity is the furthest thing from my thoughts," says Van Brock. "Whilst touring the country in the interests of science, I heard the rumors to which I have referred. In a village possessing the singular appellation of Chordia, I met an aged prospector who told me that he had seen one of the aborigines, clad in the skin of a wild animal and armed with a bludgeon. The wildman, he said, emitted a most peculiar and piercing cry when sighted, and fled into the recesses of the hills. I am confident that it is some survivor of a pre-Indian race, and I am determined to investigate." "They ain't no such critter in these hills," snorted Uncle Jacob. "I've roamed all over 'em for 30 year, and I ain't seen no wildman." "Well," says Glanton, "they's something unnatural up there, because I been hearin' some funny yarns myself. I never thought I'd be huntin' wildmen," he says. "But since that hash slinger in perdition turned me down to elope with a travelin' salesman, I welcomes the chance to lose myself in the mountains and forget the perfidy of womankind. What you all doing up here? Prospectin'?" he said, glancing at the tools on the mule. "Not in earnest," said Uncle Jacob hurriedly. "We're just kinda whiling away our time. They ain't no gold in these mountains. Folks says that lost haunted mine is up here somewhere," said Glanton. "A pack of lies," snorted Uncle Jacob, busting into a sweat. "Ain't no such mine. Well, Breckenridge, let's be shovin'. Got to make Antelope Peak before sundown. I thought we was going to Apache Canyon," I says, and he give me a awful glare, and said, "Yes, Breckenridge, that's right, Antelope Peak, just like you said." "So long, gents, so long," said Glanton, so we turned off the trail almost at right angles to our course, me following Uncle Jacob bewilderedly. When we was out of sight of the others, he reined around again. "When nature give you the body of a giant, Breckenridge," he said, "she plumb forgot to give you any brains to go along with your muscles. You want everybody to know what we're looking for?" "Or," I said, Them fellas is just looking for wildmen, wildmen. He snorted. They don't have to go no further than Chaw Deer on payday night to find more wildmen than they could handle. I ain't swallowing no such stuff. Gold is what they're after, I tell you. I seen Glanton talking to that Mex in Perdition the day I bought that map from him. I believe they either got wind of that mine, or know I got that map, or both. What you going to do? I asked him. Head for Apache Canyon by another trail, he said. So we done so and drove there after night. Him not willing to stop till we got there. It was deep, with big high cliffs cut with ravines and gulches here and there, and very wild in appearance. We didn't descend into the canyon that night, but camped on a plateau above it. Uncle Jacob allowed we'd begin exploring next morning. He said there was lots of caves in the canyon, and he'd been in all of them. He said he hadn't never found nothing except buzz and painters and rattlesnakes, but he believed one of them caves went on through into another, hidden canyon, and there was where the gold was at. Next morning I was awoke by Uncle Jacob shaking me, and his whiskers was curling with rage. What's the matter? I demanded, setting up and pulling my guns. They're here. He squalled. Doggone it, I suspected 'em all the time. Get up, you big lunk. Don't set the gorpin with a gun in each hand like a idiot. They're here, I tell you. Who's here? I asked. The darn tenderfoot and his Gus Texas gunfighter, snarled Uncle Jacob. I was up just at daylight, and pretty soon I seen a wisp of smoke curling up from behind a big rock t'other side of the flat. I snuck over there, and there was Glanton frying bacon, and Van Brock was pretending to be looking at some flowers with a magnifying glass. The blame fake. He ain't no professor. I bet he's a darn crook. They're following us. They aim to murder us and rob us of my map. Or, Glanton wouldn't do that, I said. And Uncle Jacob said, you shut up. A man will do anything war gold is concerned. Dang it all, get up and do something. You going to sit there, you big lummox, and let us get murdered in our sleep? That's the trouble of being the biggest man in your clan. The rest of the family always dumps all the unpleasant jobs onto your shoulders. I pulled on my boots and headed across the flat, with Uncle Jacob's war songs ringing in my ears, and I didn't notice whether he was bringing up the rear with his Winchester or not. There was a scattering of trees on the flat, and about halfway across a figure emerged from amongst them, headed my direction with fire in his eye. It was Glanton. So, you big mountain grizzly, he greeted me rambunctiously. You was going to Antelope Peak, hey? Kinda got off the road, didn't you? Oh, we're on to you, we are. What you mean? I demanded. He was acting like he was the one which ought to feel righteously indignant, instead of me. You know what I mean? He says, frothing slightly at the mouth. I didn't believe it when Van Brock first said he suspicioned you, even though you hombres did act funny yesterday when we met you on the trail. But this morning when I glimpsed your fool Uncle Jacob spy in on our camp, and then seen him sneaking off through the brush, I knowed Van Brock was right. You're after what we're after, and you all resorts to dirty underhanded tactics. Does you deny you're after the same thing we are? No, I don't, I said. Uncle Jacob's got more right to it than you all. And when you says we uses underhanded tricks, you're a liar. That settles it. Gnashed he. Go for your gun. I don't want to perforate you, I growled. I ain't hankering to conclude your mortal career, he admitted. But Haunted Mountain ain't big enough for both of us. Take her off your guns and I'll maul the living daylights out of you, big as you be. I unbuckled my gun belt and hung it on a limb, and he laid off his'n, and hit me in the stomach and on the ear and in the nose, and then he socked me in the jaw and knocked out a tooth. This made me mad, so I taken him by the neck and throwed him against the ground so hard it jolted all the wind out to him. I then sat on him and started banging his head against a convenient boulder, and his cussing was terrible to hear. If you all had acted like white men, I gritted, we'd have give you a share in that they're mine. What you talking about? He gurgled, trying to haul his bowie out of his boot which I had my knee on. The lost haunted mine, of course, I snarled, getting a fresh grip on his ears. Hold on, he protested. You mean you all are just looking for gold? On the level? I was so astonished I quit hammering his skull against the rock. Why, what else? I demanded. Ain't you all following us to steal Uncle Jacob's map which shows where the mine is hid? Get off of me, he snorted disgustfully, taking advantage of my surprise to push me off. Hell, he said, starting to knock the dust off of his breeches. I might have known that Tenderfoot was wool gathering. After we seen you all yesterday, and he heard you mention Apache Canyon, he told me he believed you was following us. He said that yarn about prospecting was just a blind. He said he believed you was working for a rival scientific society to get ahead of us and capture the Wildman yourselves. What? I said. You mean that Wildman yarn is straight, so far as we're concerned, said Bill. Prospectors is been telling some unusual stories about Apache Canyon. Well, I laughed at him at first, but he kept on using so many .45 caliber words that he got me to believing it might be so. 'Cause, after all, here was Megden Tenderfoot on the trail of a Wildman, and there wasn't no reason to think you and Jacob Grimes was any more sensible than me. Then, this morning when I seen Joe peeking at me from the brush, I decided Van Broek must be right. You all hadn't never went to Antelope Peak. The more I thought it over, the more certain I was that you was following us to steal our Wildman, so I started over to have a showdown. Well, I said, we've reached to understanding at last. You don't want our mine, and we sure don't want your Wildman. There's plenty of them amongst my relatives on Bear Creek. Let's get Van Broek and lug him over to our camp and explain things to him and my weak-minded uncle. All right, said Glanton, buckling on his guns. Hey, what's that? From down in the canyon come a yell, help. Aid. Assistance, it's Van Broek. Yelped Glanton. He's wandered down into the canyon by himself. Come on. Right near their camp there was a ravine leading down to the floor of the canyon. We pelted down that at full speed, and emerged near the wall of the cliffs. There was the black mouth of a cave showing nearby, in a kind of cleft, and just outside this cleft Van Broek was staggering around, yowling like a hound dog with his tail caught in the door. His cork helmet was laying on the ground all bashed out to shape, and his specs was lying near it. He had a knob on his head as big as a turnip and he was doing a kind of ghost dance or something all over the place. He couldn't see very good without his specs, 'cause when he sighted us he gave a shriek and starting legging it for the other end of the canyon, seeming to think we was more enemies. Not wanting to indulge in no sprint in that heat, Bill shot a heel off of his boot, and that brung him down squalling blue murder. Help! He shrieked. Mr. Glanton. Help! I'm being attacked. Help, or, shut up, snorted Bill. I'm Glanton. You're all right. Give him his specs, Breck. Now what's the matter? He put him on, gasping for breath, and staggered up, wild-eyed, and pinted at the cave and hollered, the Wildman. I saw him, as I descended into the canyon on a private exploring expedition. A giant with a panther skin about his waist, and a club in his hand. He dealt me a murderous blow with the bludgeon when I sought to apprehend him, and fled into that cavern. He should be arrested. I looked into the cave. It was too dark to see anything except for a hoot owl. He must have saw something, Breck, said Glanton, hitching his gun harness. Something sure cracked him on the conch. I've been hearing some queer tales about this canyon, myself. Maybe I better sling some lead in there. No, no, no. Broke in Van Broek. We must capture him alive. What's going on here? Said a voice, and we turned to see Uncle Jacob approaching with his Winchester in his hands. Everything's all right, Uncle Jacob, I said. They don't want your mine. They're after the Wildman, like they said, and we got him cornered in the cave. All right, huh? He snorted. I reckon you thinks it's all right for you to waste your time with such darn foolishness when you ought to be helping me look for my mine. A big help you be. Where was you whilst I was arguing with Bill here? I demanded. I knowed you could handle the situation, so I started exploring the canyon, he said. Come on, we got work to do. But the Wildman, cried Van Broek. Your nephew would be invaluable in securing the specimen. Think of science. Think of progress. Think of a striped skunk. Snorted Uncle Jacob. Breckenridge, are you coming? Or, shut up, I said disgustedly. You both make me tired. I'm going in there and run that Wildman out, and Bill, You shoot him in the hind leg as he comes out, so's we can catch him and tie him up." "But you left your guns hanging onto that limb up on the plateau," objected Glanton. "I don't need them," I said. "Didn't you hear Van Broek say we was to catch him alive? If I started shooting in the dark I might ruin him." "All right," says Bill, cocking his 6-shooters. "Go ahead. I figure you're a match for any wildman that ever come down the pike." So I went into the cleft and entered the cave, and it was dark as all get out. I groped my way along and discovered the main tunnel split into 2, so I taken the biggest one. It seemed to get darker the further I went, and pretty soon I bumped into something big and hairy and it went whump and grabbed me. Thinks I, it's the wildman, and he's on the warpath. We waded into each other and tumbled around on the rocky floor in the dark, biting and mauling and tearing. I'm the biggest and the fightinest man on Bear Creek, which is famed far and wide for its ring-tailed scrappers, but this wildman sure give me my hands full. He was the biggest hairiest critter I ever laid hands on, and he had more teeth and talons than I thought a human could possibly have. He chawed me with vigor and enthusiasm, and he waltzed up and down my frame free and hearty, and swept the floor with me till I was groggy. For a while I thought I was going to give up the ghost, and I thought with despair of how humiliated my relatives on Bear Creek would be to hear their champion battler had been clawed to death by a wildman in a cave. That made me plumb ashamed for weakening, and the socks I give him more to have laid out any man, wild or tame, to say nothing of the pile-driver kicks in his belly, and butting him with my head so he gasped. I got what felt like a ear in my mouth and commenced chawing on it, and presently, what with this and other mayhem I committed on him, he gave a most inhuman squall and bust away and went lickety-split for the outside world. I riz up and staggered after him, hearing a wild chorus of yells break forth outside, but no shots. I bust out into the open, bloody all over, and my clothes hanging in tatters. "Where is he?" I hollered. "Did you let him get away?" "Who?" said Glanton, coming out from behind a boulder, whilst Van Broek and Uncle Jacob dropped down out of a tree nearby. "The wildman, damn it!" I roared. "We ain't seen no wildman," said Glanton. "Well, what was that thing I just run out of the cave?" I hollered. "That was a grizzly bear," said Glanton. "Yeah," sneered Uncle Jacob, "and that was Van Broek's wildman. And now, Breckenridge, if you're through playing, we'll—" "No, no," hollered Van Broek, jumping up and down. "It was a human being which smote me and fled into the cavern. Not a bear. It is still in there somewhere, unless there is another exit to the cavern." "Well, he ain't in there now," said Uncle Jacob, peering into the mouth of the cave. "Not even a wildman would run into a grizzly's cave, or if he did, he wouldn't stay long. Oomp." A rock come whizzing out of the cave and hit Uncle Jacob in the belly, and he doubled up on the ground. "Aha!" I roared, knocking up Glanton's ready 6-shooter. "I know. There's 2 tunnels in here. He's in that smaller cave. I went into the wrong one. Stay here, you all, and gimme room. This time I gets him." With that I rushed into the cave mouth again, disregarding some more rocks which emerged, and plunged into the smaller opening. It was dark as pitch, but I seemed to be running along a narrow tunnel, and ahead of me I heard bare feet pattering on the rock. I followed them at full lope, and presently seen a faint hint of light. The next minute I rounded a turn and come out into a wide place, which was lit by a shaft of light coming in through a cleft in the wall, some yards up. In the light I seen a fantastic figure climbing up on a ledge, trying to reach that cleft. "Come down off of that!" I thundered, and gave a leap and grabbed the ledge by one hand and hung on, and reached for his legs with t'other hand. He gave a squall as I grabbed his ankle and splintered his club over my head. The force of the lick broke off the lip of the rock ledge I was holding to, and we crashed to the floor together, because I didn't let loose of him. Fortunately, I hit the rock floor headfirst, which broke my fall and kept me from fracturing any of my important limbs, and his head hit my jaw, which rendered him unconscious. I riz up and picked up my limp captive and carried him out into the daylight where the others was waiting. I dumped him on the ground and they stared at him like they couldn't believe it. He was a gaunt old cuss with whiskers about a foot long and matted hair, and he had a mountain lion's hide tied around his waist. "A white man," enthused Van Broek, dancing up and down. An unmistakable Caucasian. This is stupendous. A prehistoric survivor of a pre-Indian epoch. What an aid to anthropology. A wildman. A veritable wildman. Wildman, hell. Snorted Uncle Jacob. That's old Joshua Braxton, which was trying to marry that old maid school teacher down at Chaudiere all last winter. I was trying to marry her, said Joshua bitterly, setting up suddenly and glaring at all of us. That there is good, that there is. And me all the time fighting for my life against it. Her and all her relations was trying to marry her to me. They made my life a curse. They was finally all set to kidnap me and marry me by force. That's why I come away off up here, and put on this rig to scare folks away. All I craves is peace and quiet and no darn women. Van Broek begun to cry because there wasn't no wildman, and Uncle Jacob said, well, now that this darn foolishness is settled, maybe I can get to something important. Joshua, you know these mountains even better than I do. I want you to help me find the lost haunted mine. There ain't no such mine, said Joshua. That old prospector imagined all that stuff whilst he was wandering around over the desert crazy, but I got a map I bought from a Mexican in perdition, hollered Uncle Jacob. Let me see that map, said Glanton. Why, hell, he said, that there is a fake. I seen that Mexican drawing it, and he said he was going to try to sell it to some old jassack for the price of a drunk. Uncle Jacob sat down on a rock and pulled his whiskers. My dreams is bust, he said weakly. I'm going home to my wife. You must be desperate if it's come to that, said old Joshua acidly. You better stay up here. If they ain't no gold, they ain't no women to torment a body, either. Women is a snare and a delusion, agreed Glanton. Van Broek can go back with these fellas. I'm staying with Joshua. You all ought to be ashamed talking about women that way, I reproached M. What, in this here lousy and troubled world can compare to women's gentle sweetness? They're the scoundrel is. Screeched a familiar voice. Don't let him get away. Shoot him if he tries to run, returned Sudden. We'd been arguing so loud amongst ourselves we hadn't noticed a gang of folks coming down the ravine. There was Aunt Levica and the sheriff of Chaudiere with 10 men, and they all pointed sawed-off shotguns at me. Don't get rough, Elkins, warned the sheriff nervously. They're all loaded with buckshot and 10-penny nails. I knows your reputation and I takes no chances. I arrests you for the kidnapping of Jacob Grimes. Are you plumb crazy? I demanded. Kidnapping? Hollered Aunt Levica, waving a piece of paper. Abducting your poor old uncle. Aiming to hold him for ransom. It's all writ down in your own handwriting right here on this here paper. Saying you are taking Jacob away off into the mountains, warning me not to try to follow. Same as threatening me. I never heard of such doings. Soon as that good-for-nothing Joe Hopkins brung me that there insolent letter, I went right after the sheriff. Joshua Braxton, what air you doing in the Monsant Togs? My land, I dunno what we're coming to. Well, sheriff, what you standing there for like a ninny? Why'n't you put some handcuffs and chains and shackles on him? Air you scared of the big lunkhead? Or, heck, I said. This is all a mistake. I won't threatening nobody in that the letter. Then where's Jacob? She demanded. Produce him immediately, or he ducked into that cave, said Glanton. I stuck my head in and roared, Uncle Jacob. You come out of there and explain before I come in after you. He snuck out looking meek and downtrodden, and I says, you tell these idiots that I ain't no kidnapper. That's right, he said. I brung him along with me. Hell, said the sheriff, disgustedly. Have we come all this way on a wild goose chase? I should have knew better to listen to a woman. You shut your fool mouth, squalled Aunt Levica. A fine sheriff you be. Anyway, what was Breckenridge doing up here with you, Jacob? He was helping me look for a mine, Lavaki, he said. Helping you? She screeched. Why, I sent him to fetch you back. Breckenridge Elkins, I'll tell your pap about this, you big, lazy, good-for-nothing, low-down, ornery, or, shut up. I roared, exasperated beyond endurance. I seldom lets my voice go its full blast. Echoes rolled through the canyon like thunder. The trees shook and the pine cones fell like hail, and rocks tumbled down the mountainsides. Aunt Lavica staggered backwards with an outraged squall. "Jacob!" she hollered. "Are you going to allow that ruffian to use that the tone of voice to me? I demands that you flail the living daylights out of the scoundrel right now." Uncle Jacob winked at me. Now, Lavaki," he started soothing her, and she gave him a clip under the ear that changed ends with him. The sheriff and his posse and Van Brock took out up the ravine like the devil was after him, and Glanton bit off a chaw of Tabuxa and says to me, he says, "Well, what was you fixin' to say about women's gentle sweetness?" "Nothin'," I snarled. "Come on, let's get going. I yearns to find a more quiet and secluded spot than this here. I'm stayin' with Joshua and you and the grizzly."